Instead, the monthly distribution may count as income. In other states, the full retirement account balance may still count as an available asset, even if distributions have begun. So this is not a national rule you can rely on blindly. The original source mentions states like Florida, Georgia, and New York as examples where payout status can matter, and states like Arizona, Missouri, and Pennsylvania as examples where the account may still be counted, but you have to confirm your own state's rule. Because this is exactly the kind of Medicaid issue where advice from the wrong state can be completely wrong for your family. Now federal tax law has its own retirement distribution rules. The IRS says that for many retirement accounts, required minimum distributions generally begin at age 73, and during the owner's lifetime, Roth IRAs generally do not have required minimum distributions. But Medicaid payout status is not the same thing as federal RMD rules. Your state may require a specific distribution setup. It may require a monthly payment. It may use an RMD-like calculation. It may have its own definition. So if someone says, just start taking distributions and Medicaid cannot count the accounts, slow down, ask in which state, under which rule, for which kind of account, and what amount must be distributed. For example, imagine someone in a state that recognizes payout status. They are 71, and they have $180,000 in a traditional retirement account. If the state treats that account balance as exempt, once it is properly in payout status, then setting up the required recurring distribution could change the Medicaid resource picture. But if the same person lives in a state that counts the full balance, the same move may not work. That is why the action step is called the plan administrator, but also call the Medicaid professional. Ask the plan administrator. What recurring distribution options exist? Then ask your state Medicaid office, elder law attorney, or Medicaid planner. Does this state exempt retirement accounts in payout status for long-term care Medicaid? Ask what documentation they need. Ask whether Roth IRAs are treated differently. Ask whether the account owner's age changes the answer, and ask whether the monthly distribution will affect the income side of eligibility. Now here is what all three tools have in common. They are not magic, they are not secret loopholes, and they are not something you hide from Medicaid. They are rules about how assets are categorized. A funeral contract may be an allowed spend-down purchase. A compliant annuity may convert a resource into income if it meets strict rules. A retirement account may be treated as income, producing instead of countable principal in some states, but all of them must be disclosed. All of them must match state rules, and all of them can go badly if done casually. This is also different from a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. A Medicaid Asset Protection Trust can be useful in some plans, but transfers into that kind of trust often run into the 5-year look-back. So if care is needed soon, that may not solve the immediate problem. The three tools in this video are different because they are usually not simple gifts. They are either purchases for value income conversions or account status rules, but the difference only matters if the paperwork is right. So if I had to put the whole thing in plain English, I would say this. Do not wait and the nursing home application is already being denied to ask what is countable. Do not give money away because someone said you have to get under $2,000. Do not buy a random annuity because someone said annuities are protected. Do not assume your IRA is safe or counted without checking your state. And do not call anything invisible. Call it what it is, possibly exempt, possibly non-countable, possibly treated as income, possibly allowed under your state's Medicaid rules. That language is less exciting, but it is a lot safer. The practical checklist is simple. First, ask your state Medicaid office what the resource limit is for the exact program you are applying for. Second, ask what assets are exempt and what assets are countable. Third, if you are a few $1,000s over, ask about irrevocable funeral or pre-need contracts. Fourth, if there is a larger lump sum, ask an elder law attorney about a Medicaid-compliant annuity. Fifth, if there is an IRA, 401k, 403b, or pension account, ask whether your state recognizes payout status. And sixth, do this before the application is filed, if you can. Because once the caseworker is reviewing the application, their job is usually to apply the rules to the facts in front of them, not to redesign your whole plan for the best possible outcome. That is the gap families fall into. They ask too late. They spend too fast. They give away money and create penalties. Or they assume everything has to disappear before Medicaid can help. Sometimes the better answer is not spend it all. Sometimes it is structure it correctly, Document it clearly and confirm the state rule before you move the money. Okay, so I want to talk about Medicaid and long-term care planning, but I want to be careful right from the start. When people say an account is invisible to Medicaid, that can be misleading. Medicaid is not about hiding money, it is not about pretending an account does not exist, and it is definitely not about failing to disclose something on an application. What we are really talking about is whether certain assets may be treated differently under Medicaid rules if they are set up correctly. And that last phrase matters, set up correctly. In the right state, for the right person, at the right time, with the right paperwork, because Medicaid is partly federal, but it is also state-run, so a strategy that works in one state may not work in another state. And a strategy that works for a married couple may not work the same way for a single person. So do not hear this as legal advice. Hear it as a list of questions to ask an elder law attorney, a certified Medicaid planner, or your state Medicaid office before a nursing home application is filed. Now, the basic problem is pretty simple. Long-term nursing home care can cost thousands of dollars per month. In many places, it can easily be around $9,000 a month or more. Medicaid may help pay for long-term care, but only if you meet your state's eligibility rules. And for older adults, especially long-term care Medicaid, there may be both income rules and resource rules. In many states, a single applicant may have only around $2,000 in countable resources. But the key word is countable. Some things may be exempt, some things may be treated as income instead of a resource. Some things may create a penalty if transferred the wrong way, and some things are allowed only if state rules recognize them. So the question is not how do I hide assets? The question is which dollars are countable, which dollars are exempt, and which choices create a 5-year look-back problem. The first tool people talk about is an irrevocable funeral trust or irrevocable pre-need funeral contract. This is money set aside to pay for funeral and burial expenses, and the important word is irrevocable. If you can cancel the plan, take the cash back, and spend it on anything, then Medicaid may still treat it as available money. But if the contract is truly irrevocable, and it is allowed under your state's rules, then the money may be treated as not countable for Medicaid eligibility. This can help someone who is a few $1,000s over the resource limit. For example, imagine a widow with $9,000 in a savings account. If her state limit is around $2,000, that extra $7,000 can block eligibility. But if she uses that money to purchase a properly structured, irrevocable funeral contract, and her state allows it, the same money may be removed from countable resources, not because it vanished, not because it was hidden, because it was spent for a specific allowed purpose. That is very different from giving the money to a child. Giving it away can trigger Medicaid's look-back rules. Buying a permitted funeral contract for fair value is usually treated differently. But the details matter. States may cap how much can be protected this way. Some states allow around $10,000 to $15,000. Some allow more. Some have very specific rules about burial spaces, pre-need contracts, cash value, and whether the plan is revocable. So the action step is not walk into any funeral home and buy anything. The action step is ask for an irrevocable pre-need contract or irrevocable funeral trust. Ask for a written goods and services statement. Ask what happens if prices change. Ask what happens if you move states. Ask who receives any excess funds, and then confirm with your state Medicaid office or an elder law professional before signing. The second tool is a Medicaid compliant annuity. This is for a different problem. The funeral trust might handle a few $1,000s, but some families are dealing with $40,000, $60,000, zone $100,000, or more in cash CDs or other assets. A Medicaid compliant annuity can sometimes convert a lump sum resource into an income stream, but this is one of those areas where the contract language has to be right. Under federal Medicaid transfer rules, an annuity can create problems unless it meets specific requirements. Generally, people look for words like irrevocable, non-assignable, actuarially sound, equal payments, no deferral, no balloon payment, and the state named as a remainder beneficiary as required. That is not casual language. It is the difference between a contract that helps and a contract that still counts, or worse, creates a transfer penalty. So do not walk into a general insurance office and ask for an annuity. That is too vague. A normal annuity is not automatically Medicaid compliant, and an insurance agent who is very good at retirement income products may still not know your state's Medicaid rules. For married couples, this can matter even more. If one spouse needs nursing home care and the other spouse is still living in the community, Medicaid has spousal impoverishment rules. The community spouse may be allowed to keep a certain amount of resources. For 2026, the maximum community spouse resource allowance is often cited around $162,660, though states can apply their own rules within federal limits. If assets are above what the community spouse can keep, a properly structured annuity may sometimes convert excess resources into income for the spouse at home. But again, this is not a do. It's your self-move. The monthly annuity payment may count as income. The state may have to be listed as a remainder beneficiary. The payout term matters. The life expectancy table matters. The applicant spouse and community spouse rules matter. So the action step is talk to an elder law attorney or Medicaid planner before buying anything. Use the phrase Medicaid compliant annuity. Ask whether it must be irrevocable, non-assignable, actuarially sound, and payable in equal installments. Ask how the income will be treated. Ask what happens if the annuitant dies early. And ask whether your state accepts that structure for your situation. The third area is a retirement account in payout status, and this is where state rules really matter. A traditional IRA, 401k, 403b, or similar retirement account may be treated differently depending on the state. In some states, once the account is in payout status, meaning it is paying regular distributions, the balance may not be counted the same way as a regular cash asset.